From a regional jet that flipped upside down in a Toronto snowstorm and a Boeing 737 which ended up in the Pacific Ocean after missing the runway, to this Polish airliner that was forced to land on its belly after the landing gear wouldn't come down, and much more. These are 10 times passengers thought they would die during landing. On February 17th of 2025, a Delta CRJ 900 was arriving into Toronto from Minneapolis. Meanwhile, a powerful storm brought heavy crosswinds and 20 inches of snow. As the plane descended down to the runway, something went very wrong. The first officer reduced thrust to idle in response to a gust. The sink rate warning blared in the cockpit, but it was too late. The plane slammed into the runway at twice what the landing gear was rated to handle. The plane rolled, slid, and came to rest upside down. Passengers hung from their seatbelts like bats before scrambling to unbuckle and escape the aircraft. Thankfully, all 80 people on board survived. 21 were injured, including a child and 2 adults with serious injuries. Every single one of them was eventually released from the hospital and expected to make a full recovery. On November 5th of 1997, a Virgin Atlantic Airbus A340 was on approach into Heathrow, flying in from LAX. They lowered the landing gear but got a nasty surprise. The left main gear refused to fully extend.
He's very slow, isn't he? Please.
Sparks flew as the left wing scraped along the tarmac for over 4,000 feet. Thankfully, no fire broke out. The crews immediately deployed the emergency slides, and all 114 people on board evacuated safely, with only 7 minor injuries. Investigation revealed a brake torque rod had come loose during takeoff back in LA, jamming the entire landing gear assembly. On October 18th of 2011, an Iran Air Boeing 727 was on its way home from Moscow to Tehran. But as the plane lined up for the runway, the nose landing gear wouldn't come down. Our pilots tried everything in the book to get the gear unstuck, even a manual gravity drop. Nothing worked. He held up the nose for as long as possible before gently kissing the runway. Thankfully, all 113 souls walked away without a scratch. The 727 was nearly 40 years old at the time, and the U.S. sanctions had made it extremely difficult for Iran to get genuine Boeing spare parts for years. On September 28th of 2018, Air Niugini Flight 73 was island hopping across Micronesia in a Boeing 737-800. The plane departed Pohnpei and was headed for a stopover at Chuuk International Airport, a tiny strip of tarmac sitting right on the edge of the Pacific. As our pilots began their descent, the weather took a turn. Heavy rain rolled in, and visibility dropped fast. An engineer sitting in the jump seat had decided to record the landing, but what he captured next was nothing short of terrifying.
Approaching minimums.
Sink rate. Glide slow. Sink rate. Glide slow.
100.
Glide slow. Sink rate.
Remarkably, the plane didn't break apart on impact. Local boaters and a team of U.S. Navy divers who happened to be nearby rushed out and pulled everyone out from the sinking aircraft. 35 passengers and 12 crew made it out alive. Sadly, 1 passenger didn't survive. Investigators determined he hadn't been wearing his seatbelt, and the force of impact threw him forward into the seats ahead. He was found by Japanese divers 3 days later, still inside the submerged fuselage. The investigation pointed the finger squarely at the flight crew. They hadn't followed standard procedures, skipped critical checklists, and ignored warning after warning on the way down. On January 15th of 2023, Yeti Airlines Flight 691 prepared for landing at Pokhara, Nepal. The ATR-72 carried 68 passengers and 4 crew members. As the plane lined up for its final approach, the co-pilot called for flaps. But instead of moving the flap lever, the captain in the right seat accidentally pulled the condition levers to feather. That essentially shut off thrust to both propellers. A passenger had been live streaming his first and last ever flight on Facebook. The video shows everyone calm and unaware until the final seconds. Sadly, all 72 people on board were killed. An investigation uncovered a chain of failures across the board: poor crew coordination, skipped checklists, and a regulator that approved a new runway without proper approach procedures in place. On July 19th of 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 was flying from Denver, Colorado, en route to Chicago. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10 carried 285 passengers and 11 crew members. About an hour into the flight, the crew heard a loud bang, followed by violent shuddering throughout the airframe. The titanium fan disc in the tail-mounted engine had exploded at 37,000 feet. That alone would have been survivable, but the debris tore through the tail and severed all 3 of the plane's hydraulic systems, leaving our pilots with no flight controls. However, Captain Al Haynes and his crew discovered they could steer barely, using nothing but engine thrust on the 2 remaining wing engines. Luckily, a DC-10 flight instructor named Dennis Fitch happened to be on board as a passenger. He jumped into the cockpit and helped work the throttles. For 44 harrowing minutes, the crew wrestled the crippled jet toward Sioux Gateway Airport in Sioux City, Iowa. But the aircraft came in way too fast and way too steep. Of the 296 people on board, 184 survived. By all accounts, nobody should have walked away from that landing. When investigators tried to recreate the scenario in flight simulators, even expert pilots couldn't pull it off. The NTSB later said the crew's performance greatly exceeded reasonable expectations. On March 11th of 2026, an Air India 737 MAX 8 was wrapping up a flight from Hyderabad, India to Phuket, Thailand. On board were 131 passengers, 2 infants, and 7 crew members. Holiday paradise was right below them. The plane bounced, came back down nose first, and slammed again. The force ripped both nose wheels clean off the landing gear. The 737 scraped to a halt about halfway down the runway. With no nose wheels, taxiing to a gate was out of the question. Thankfully, everybody on board walked away without a scratch. On November 1st of 2011, an LOT Boeing 767 was on final approach into Warsaw Chopin Airport, carrying 220 passengers and 11 crew members on its transatlantic trip from New Jersey. However, the center hydraulic system had suffered a leak and drained its fluid. That was the system responsible for lowering the landing gear. Our captain circled the airport for over an hour. He needed to burn off excess fuel and give ground crews time to foam the runway below. Fire trucks rushed out, and thankfully, all 231 passengers and crew walked away without serious injury. On December 11th of 2013, a Makani Kai Air Cessna Grand Caravan took off from Kalaupapa Airport on the island of Molokai in Hawaii. The pilot had 8 passengers on board, headed to Honolulu. Shortly after takeoff, at about 500 feet over the water, the pilot heard a loud bang, followed by a total power loss. He tried to swing the plane back toward land, but they were already too far out over the ocean. Our pilot had no choice but to ditch the Cessna into the Pacific. Everyone made it out of the plane and into the water. One passenger even swam all the way to shore on his own. But tragically, another passenger suffered a fatal cardiac arrest while waiting in the water. To make matters worse, the pilot never gave a safety briefing before the flight. One passenger ended up wearing an infant-sized life vest because nobody told them where the right equipment was. On January 15th of 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 departed LaGuardia Airport in New York City. The Airbus A340, carrying 3 flight attendants, 2 pilots, and 150 passengers, was bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. The pilot in command was Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, a former Air Force fighter pilot with nearly 20,000 hours of flight time under his belt. However, about 90 seconds after takeoff, the plane slammed into a flock of Canadian geese at roughly 2,800 feet. Both engines flamed out almost immediately, and the plane went silent. Sully radioed ATC, and they offered him 2 runways back at LaGuardia and another in New Jersey. He rejected both. There simply wasn't enough altitude to make it. Then the captain came over the intercom with 3 words nobody wants to hear on an airplane: brace for impact. The plane descended into the Hudson River. Water flooded the rear cabin almost immediately. Passengers climbed out onto the wings and waited until nearby ferries arrived. Thankfully, everyone was pulled out to safety. Not a single person died that day.